Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel Legal Challenges in Modern Film Scoring, with a special emphasis on AI and the challenges for composers in the time of AI. I think it's a hot topic, so it's inevitable to discuss it right here. And we have great panelists who can share a lot of knowledge on this. We have Barbara Persing. Yeah, I know. Who has probably more experience in negotiating contracts for composers and also special things included with regard to AI, because she is an agent, talent agent, and has a lot of legal background. So you're a copyright specialist. Maybe you want to add something about your background.
Yeah, I started as a legal advisor for a collective management organization, more for screenwriters and directors. And since I think 4 years, just before a little animal called COVID came to capture us, I decided to leave collective management. Quite a good timing, and started working with film composers together with Valérie Dobelaere, who has worked her lots of years for the World Soundtrack Awards and knows the ins and outs. And yeah, we decided to combine our knowledge. She knows the film composing world, and I with my legal background and copyright background. So I'm happy to say that for a decade now, or over a decade, getting quite old, I've been defending all the audiovisual authors now. So I'm still at your side. Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
and happy to be here.
Great that you're here. And we have Michelino Bisceglia from Belgium, a renowned film composer who does big projects with large orchestra and documentaries, as well as shows for streaming services. So you can share a lot about how you work nowadays and what you think of the future. I think this is what we are all interested in. So what will happen? How will the whole sector develop? Maybe you also want to add something about yourself.
Yes. So as a composer, I work not only as composer, but I do also orchestrate for other composers. I arrange, I teach. I've also started some couple of years ago. I haven't done that.
Have you composed this?
No, that's not my
Okay.
music. It's AI. It's so we started a Belgian Screen Composers Guild to get united to defend our common interests in the work that we do. And how I do see the future. Maybe we'll talk about that later. That's a topic that's why we are here, right?
Right, and the same goes for you, Jesper. Jesper is a dear colleague of mine from Denmark. We are both ECSA board members. ECSA is the European Composer and Songwriter Alliance. And Jesper is also a pianist and has a lot of experience, and we will be interested to hear your view on things, and maybe you want to add something about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I've been writing film music for the better part of 10 years now professionally, and aside from that, I have a record label that releases film music, and along with Anselm, I've been working on behalf of composers, film composers, in the committee called FACE, which is a part of the ECSA, the Composer Songwriters Alliance. So I've been working hard on that, protecting authors' rights for around 10 years as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we have Josephine van Herpen, who has done a lot of research, extensive research on the fair balance of contractual relationships between authors and providers of audiovisual content. So we are very interested to get to know what you have to say about the current state and the future, and maybe you want to add something about yourself.
Right. Also, obviously, very happy to be here. I'm an assistant professor at KU Leuven. So here in Belgium, I teach intellectual property law, and I research as well when I find the time in between making slides. And my favorite thing to research and talk about is the music industry. My PhD was on the music industry 10 years ago. My master's thesis was also on musicians, and I'm not a composing artist, but I'm a performing cellist. but if I also find the time, which I really sadly don't. But yeah, indeed, I wrote my PhD on the music industry, on copyright contract law specifically, and I also like thinking about AI and the future of intellectual property law focused on the cultural sectors.
Great, and maybe I add something about myself. Something has been said. I'm president of the German Composers Club and film composer in Germany, doing mainly TV series. I also have a production music label, so quite some experience also with licensing. I'm also, well, keen on your views on how this will develop. Well, let's start with a short view on the current state of AI. It will just take 5 minutes. I don't want to summarize everything. You know that AI is all around and that AI is also capable of writing music, producing music, and of course it will change our industry. But at the same time, regulations come into place. So we have the AI Act in Europe. I don't want to summarize everything there, but maybe 3 key points of what is included there. So AI content has to be declared as such by the providers, and the providers have to hold a list of training material, and also the algorithms have to be designed in a way that doesn't foster copyright infringement. So if the output just copies the input, it will be a problem for the providers. These are 3 key points of the EU regulation. Sounds great, doesn't it? To protect us, and we have achieved it that quickly. Well, there is a loophole, actually. This loophole in Europe is called text and data mining. This is a regulation that is included in the DSM directive from 2019. It allows providers to scrape everything that is publicly available, so to know about current trends. And so back then, it was actually not discussed that this would allow training, so for AI purposes, for generative AI. But now it's happening, and the providers of AI content are relying on text and data mining. They say we can basically scrape everything and use it as training material because it's text and data mining. So this is where we are at ECSA and at other organizations, that we have to fight this and say, no, this is not the purpose, and text and data mining is something different than what is happening now. But for the moment, we have to live with it. We just can do an opt-out. We can opt out of AI. We will talk about how effective this is, and, well, is it actually possible to really opt out? But yeah, well, we have some regulation, we have some chances, we have some challenges and some loopholes. In the US and UK, it's called fair use. So they don't have text and data mining. They are relying on fair use just to scrape everything. Providers like OpenAI have admitted to have taken everything that was available without permission, just to train the algorithms, and now we have lawsuits and see what happens. So this is what we are at, and nobody knows how well we will be protected in future, but obviously we have to take care of ourselves because AI is capable of writing music, and we have to we have to look at our contracts also with regard to what do we allow the providers. So if we compose a score, do we want to allow the one who is contracting us to use our music as training material for something in future? Michel, how do you feel about it?
It's scary. Well, I would not accept that legally wise. I mean, contract wise, I would not. But the problem is, probably producers are gonna push us to accept that, like they're doing with the publishing. You know, it's been, you know, most of the composers here know the experience of receiving contracts, and by default, it's you will have to take distance from your publishing site, which is already like standard default. And if you start to argue about that, you might lose your job. And I'm afraid that regarding this AI option is going to be the same. That will sneak in, and it's up to us to take position in that. Me personally, I would not accept that, even not for even if it would be numerated, financially wise, I would not accept that. It's just not an option. But we are not alone. I don't think that everybody's gonna think the same way. But I think we have to reflect on that, what that means. And I think that it's going to be a situation where our future is going to be I wouldn't say in danger, but everything will be a loose ground. And I think there was a storm. Maybe you better hold on, to get through the storm. I think maybe we might get in. I'm curious to hear other opinions on this. I don't know what your opinion is.
Yeah. Well, before I come to you, Jesper, I would like to know from you, Barbara, have you experienced any contract including such a clause allowing training of an AI algorithm?
I haven't seen it so far, but mostly producers are a little bit behind with what legally is required. So I haven't seen too many AI clauses, but I do advise that from now on, if you sign a contract, there must be a clause included on AI, especially the transparency. You need to know contracts have always been important. You need to know which rights you sign and which rights you reserve. I agree with Michel that most producers more and more want all the rights, and sometimes they say, well, we're only a small co-producer and we have nothing to say in it anyway. We are co-producing with a major international player or streaming service, and they want all the rights. And now the AI training it might be an extra factor that has to be transferred. But do know that you have the power. I know you, as an author, you are seen as the weaker bargaining party, but that you have the right to negotiate. I do believe in the collective also. Go to your guild. There are guilds. I think it's up to them also, collective management organizations, to provide rules, conditions and fair practices, and to also have standard clauses. That's something what we're working on. I also work for the Screen Writers Guild, to have clauses in there that it becomes known that you don't need to transfer all of your rights, which is something I see more and more, not only regarding AI. So that transparency, at least if you want to, if you agree to transfer your rights for AI training purposes, at least know what you're signing to, and getting a remuneration, a proportionate remuneration at the end. That's really important. So it's all about knowing if that is.
This refers back to the panel we had last year here about full buyout contracts, and this. Actually, in some fields, the situation is improving with streaming services and so, but you always have to be aware, if you sign everything away, AI will also be included, right?
Yeah, and now we have, in Europe, we have this copyright directive that states that it's really, that as an author, you should have, your remuneration should be linked to the revenues of the exploitation of your work. So you are entitled to have a proportionate remuneration, which is a major step. We were all really happy to see that on a European and in most countries, it already has been adopted in national law. But in practice, my opinion, producers are not willing to give you a share of their revenues. They use phrases as it's not common, and yeah, young composers, they don't know, so they accept it. So even if we have the law with us now, yeah, in practice we still we haven't come much further. In my opinion, I don't see good contracts on that side. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of copyright, we always have two pillars. Number one is to give the permission to use the work for certain purposes, and number two is the remuneration. So Jesper, if someone approached you and said, well, you get your share in what we do with your music, but we want to use it as training material and make something new out of your music, and you will get some money, how would you feel about it?
Well, I guess I'm from Denmark, and we tend to be kind of polite. I really just want to say, like, LOL. I've done that in a mail once, just replied, because I think, to be honest, one of the great... How many of you guys are film composers, actually? I'm kind of curious to know. So mostly everyone in here. And I think, to me, one of the best things about writing film music is to be a part of a team where everyone involved, we sort of work towards one common goal, and that is to create the best possible film or TV show we can. And whenever someone approaches me like that, I have sort of an ideology that I would like what is fair to me. So if someone is writing a student film and no one gets paid, it's okay to ask me to work for free. I might not want to or be able to, but it's okay if everyone else is doing it. If everyone else is making money, I should make money as well. And honestly, I think of myself and I think of all of us as composers as an asset to a production. And whenever someone comes with a proposal like that, I almost feel like a burden. Like, film music is something we need to have. It's a bit annoying, but yeah, we want a composer. And if you say no, we'll just ask you or you or you or whatever. And eventually someone will say yes. And that's I think that's also why being a film composer has been increasingly popular field in recent 10 years. And I think that's also one of the reasons we've seen this race to the bottom concerning remuneration, or sorry, the higher you get to the pay, the fee, sorry. And because if someone says no, the other one will say yes. But I do actually think that with this AI revolution we're talking about now, I think it's so important that we kind of unite and we have the screen composer skill to go to. So we're not alone, even though we're younger upcoming composers, because if we agree to these terms of handing over our rights to AI training purposes, it can, especially for younger composers, mean that we are basically putting ourselves out of work. So yeah, I think it's a big issue we have at the moment.
Well, Josephine, with all your knowledge, empirical knowledge on the fair balance, or whether it's fair or not, we can discuss, but on the balance between artists, creators, and the ones who contract them, do we have a chance to find a fair solution with regard to AI? So what does your glass ball say?
Do we have a chance? Yes. Is the chance high? I reserve judgment. As a lawyer, I'm legally obliged to never answer a question with yes or no. So today, it's gonna be a maybe, and it depends from me. So when I was writing my PhD, there was no ChatGPT, there was no Gen AI, Midjourney, Dolly, whatever.
So you wrote it yourself?
I did, integrally, complete with titles that were musically inspired, with like the conclusion being named Coda, and then the introductory chapter being named Overture and stuff like that. Yeah. Those lame jokes really did come 100% from me. So what I wrote about in terms of fair balance and fair remuneration in the thesis text itself, it was on the basis of what we knew before. So how does AI change all of this balance? Obviously, it brings it completely to another dimension, right? So I have certain hopes still, but they are rooted indeed in the wish for a collective dimension to be higher and everybody to come together and stand as one to unite against unfair situations. But then my main concern at the moment, legally speaking, is competition law, because you can't form a cartel and set prices. Because if you say, okay, we will grant you the AI rights against a minimum of, for example, 40% of the ensuing revenues, then competition authorities will come, right? And there are rules that say that freelancers have more rights in coming together and bargaining collectively. But still, as I've heard multiple times, it's not really all that easy to ensure that competition is really 100% clear. And if it's not 100% clear, I would definitely understand people backing away from trying to bargain collectively, because the fines that you can get is 10% of the total revenues, or not even profit margin, total revenues garnered as a result of the cartel at issue. So that has a super big chilling effect, I fear. So that's rendering the chances of absolute fairness significantly lower, I would say.
But then again, we have collecting societies.
We
and
do.
This is actually the best circumvention of antitrust laws, because we have a right to negotiate and have fair terms. So should we include this in the collecting societies' AI licensing? I know that it's happening right now. I don't know the full scope right now, but GEMA in Germany has invented a model. They say they just recently made it public to license AI. I'm curious to know more about it, but will this possibly be the solution, Jesper?
Can I be like the politician and answer something else first?
Sure.
Good, because I think it's really interesting what you say, that we as composers, we back away because there is a consequence that might cost us money. But what we are seeing on the other side, I'm always amazed at what tech companies are capable of doing when it benefits themselves. And I'm equally amazed at how little they're capable of when it benefits us. It's mind-boggling. But at the moment, we're in a situation where they don't care about fines. They know that they're blatantly, a Danish a journalist who studies this called it, so the biggest IP theft ever. And the reason it's happening is that they know what they gain from winning this race. It'll be almost impossible to imagine how much money they'll make. And the consequences of having to pay some fines to us composers is so insignificant, it's almost laughable for them. So we have this entity of huge tech giants with all the money in the world who just simply don't care about the laws at the moment. And we have composers who are afraid because we don't have that kind of money. And so we are afraid on the other hand, and like Barbara was saying, we are acknowledged as sort of the weaker part in a bargaining situation. But this is becoming so unfair at the moment that it's difficult to even use the word fair in this situation. And as regards to your question for the CMOs, I'm not sure yet, to be honest, whether it's a good idea. And the reason I hesitate, because I'm a big fan of the collective management organizations, and I think all composers should be a member of one and use them. It is that we, for quite a while, I know we're going to talk about this later, Anselm, we had this idea of this thing called opt-out. That you can actually, as a composer, you can opt out, you can go to your CMO and say, well, I don't want my music to be used in AI. And I'm yet to hear someone actually of it working in any way or form. So it seems to be some kind of fake trick to allow us to feel some kind of ownership of our works. And so until I'm quite sure what the CMOs will do, I'm a bit hesitant to say clear yes or no on that.
Yeah, the opt-out has to be machine readable, and this is not possible to apply this to all music because music is not the recording of the music, and machine readable includes the recording, otherwise it's not readable. So it's actually a contradiction in itself to assume that works are protected with an opt-out, but at least it gives a theoretical chance to apply it here and there.
And I think, if we're honest, everything we've written up until now is great. But everything we do right in the future, we might have a chance of opting out or doing something with that.
So it seems a little bit like we have no chance to really protect ourselves in a general way. So we have to be even more aware of situations and what we allow with our music and the contract. So we have already discussed it, but Barbara, would you recommend to actively include a clause in each contract that prevents the use for AI, not just watch out for not having it included, the use for AI, but really to prevent it, to make it even clearer?
Prevent it from using it? Or
to prevent the one who's contracting a composer from using the music for AI training purposes.
Well, yeah, as long as we don't know, there's still so many question marks. Where you talked about the text and data exception, data mining exception, and the opt-outs. But then, does it fall under that? We already have a study that says it doesn't. So the opt-out is, we have no idea how we have to do it. Nobody knows. And do we have to do it if it doesn't fall under the exception, if what they are doing, the AI models, is illegal anyway? So the opt-out is like a safeguard. As long as we don't know, yes, please do have it in your contracts. I would advise it and regard to collective management organizations. Not every country has that way of working, but I believe in the countries where we do have a good collective management organization, that is the way to go. I mean, that's something that you have to organize on a collective organization. If we're talking about not using your work for the training of AI, and if it is being used, at least have a remuneration. Well, we're still talking about the input side. I'm sure we're going to switch. I think a lot of the audience might be interested also in the output side as well. But yeah.
Well, I'm sure we will come back to the dangers we are at, but I just want to change positions for a moment and say that AI is also a creative thing. So it's a creative thing to work with AI. I myself use AI, not for my music so much, but I have to admit I use ChatGPT for certain things, and I think it's great. I would not like to miss it anymore. So a question to the composers here. How do you feel about applying AI in your own music, Michel?
I don't use it for the music. Maybe I use it behind the music. I would say when I write a score, it would be great to have a great AI that makes a great mock-up, so you don't spend days to mock up the music. So I'm waiting for that application, so that would be great. Maybe to make sometimes, well, a couple of weeks ago I had to do transcription of a piano part in an orchestra piece, so I used AI to extract the piano part so I could hear the piano part better, so I could make a great transcription. But I was happy that I could make the transcription. I didn't have to ask AI to make the transcription. And it's something that I would like to share with everybody here. I think you have to preserve your own gifts and your own talents, and don't fall into start using, and at the end you are depending of using it for your creative part and your creative process, because you will go backwards very, very, very quickly. I have students who can read scores in transposed versions, but I every year have students who ask me, can I read the scores in a concert pitch where they don't have to transpose anymore? I say, why are you doing that? I mean, you're going backwards. Can you imagine if you have students say, why do I have to read? AI can read it for me, you know? So you're losing all the skills. I mean, we were capable of having so many skills, so we don't have to throw that out of the window, right? So I think that's for the new generations of composers and creative people is something to preserve. I'm happy that I came from a generation that I wrote my music on paper, and it still serves me today when I'm writing music. I can write music at home, at a piano, in a hotel, in a train, and I'm thankful for having that chance. And it's still, people are still able to do so. People are people, you know. People didn't change, right? So I think it's important to preserve that. So in terms of AI, but I don't see why I would use AI to go for a melody. Why do I need AI? I mean, I have so much imagination, and I'm thankful to have the imagination, and it's for free. You don't have to pay for it. You just sit down and try to imagine, and you go and write down the music. So, and I think once you will start with it, you won't go back anymore. That's a trap.
Will you start with it, Jesper?
I might. I mean, the thing about this whole AI thing is we're just getting started. We talked about the copyright directive, and when we worked on that, no one mentioned AI. And look at where we are now. So imagine where we are in 5 or 10 years. I think AI can be hugely beneficial to composers. And I'm sort of one of the situations where I imagine using AI if I'm doing a TV show or a film, and time is running short, I might replace another composer for any reason. There's a lot of work to be done in quite very little time. I could imagine sort of writing the themes and a lot of music, putting that into AI and having it generate sort of the more or less important underscore moments, like these 5 or 10 things could possibly be used. Because I think, I can't remember who said it, but someone said that a film score is a handful of very good cues and no bad ones. And I do think that AI will quite soon be quite capable of writing music that's not bad, and maybe even sort of be good enough-ish. But I doubt it'll ever be able to do what Michel can with pen and paper. So I do see some benefits to it, and obviously we all use it, like you were saying, sort of behind the first layer of our DAWs. And yeah, but with great power comes great responsibility, and it's easier than ever to write music that sounds pretty good. And unfortunately for a lot of directors, pretty good is good enough. And I think that's one of the real dangers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we do, like you say, if we start doing that, we won't look back. Yeah.
And after all, most important, if you really go all into AI, why would you? How can you defend to have higher fees for the work that you do if AI is doing that? So you shooting your own foot all of a sudden, I think, right? I think so.
And after all, we are film composers because we love writing music for film. And like I said, we see ourselves as an asset, or at least we should. And yeah, if we go down that road, yeah, I'm questioning how long we'll keep the same spark of joy when writing film music, if it's just something we generate.
Well, if I look at my work, I'm doing a TV series together with a colleague, and I like playing ping pong. So he composes something and I compose something, and even against each other, and see what happens. So it's a very creative process. I personally wouldn't mind having AI included as a further option to propose a melody or something and see what happens, what you make out of it. But at the same time, I would feel very bad if I knew that this algorithm was trained with the material, with the works of others, without having them remunerated. So for me, it's really an ethical thing whether the model behind it is fair or not. Because technically, I'm convinced that we will end up in a situation where AI plays a role and we work with it, and it's not just going to a certain point and not beyond that. So AI will be all around, and if AI is better at proposing something, you will probably have something included in some time. But the question is, can you do this? Is the model really fair?
I think it's really interesting because I think it depends on what is required from us. There is a trend at the moment that's quite worrying, and I'll see if I can keep it brief. I have a friend who scored an Italian TV show, and her brief was basically that whenever someone is watching their show, they're also with their phone. So this is called a second device. That's a second device threat. So we need the music to basically not be good, but be attention grabbing. So that I look away from my phone to the screen, because how can we make people watch the screen? Well, we can only do it by the usage of sound and music. And now we also have third device threats because we're also playing a game on our iPads while we're watching a TV show, while we're texting someone on our phone. So the music needs to be even more attention grabbing. And I think AI is perfectly capable of writing attention grabbing music because it does need to be good. And so if we go down that road, and if that becomes the norm for sort of the next generation of TV show watchers, who are used to being their own music supervisor on TikTok. So we're all used to having music all the time that doesn't really fit what we're watching, but never mind. If that's the way we're going, yeah, I think AI will be a huge threat to us composers. But if there is a requirement to write decent melodies and actually have this narrative going through the entire film, I think it'll be a longer process before we're sort of threatened.
A friend of mine, a colleague of mine, he is a very successful advertising composer. He experienced something that an agency approached him, and he used to do high-budget songs for advertising. They said, well, we actually have our song generated by AI, but the ending isn't proper, and we cannot prompt this. It doesn't work. So can you please fix the ending of the song? This is like something like a worst-case scenario. This might happen then and now.
Well, we know that as a composer, they tempt the music, John Williams or or and they say, can you write something similar? You know, so we know that it's the same situation. So every composer need to find a way out. How do you deal with that? What's your position in this? I think might say it's kind of problematic, right?
Can be a relief to say to the customer, well, if you want a sound alike, do it with AI, and AI goes to prison.
But you know, it's you know, at the end, it's always a situation between people. It's always a conversation between people. You know, producers sometimes they ask you because they even don't know that you might be capable to write something better. You know, so it's also up to the composer or the one who's who's facing this situation to try to turn that around, try to come up with a better solution, try to come up with, maybe convince him with it. You might say, listen, I'm going to propose you 3 other options. Maybe you might listen to that and choose one of those, you know. Don't go for the easy way, I would say. And at the end, it might be the easiest to defend yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I look at my scoring work, a lot of results come from making faults, making something by accident. So I just play something and I didn't intend this, and I say, oh, this is great. But this, again, is a chance for AI. So if AI proposes something you would not have had in mind. How can we achieve a situation where we are comfortable with in ethical terms, and also to have a creative playground we can rely on without being replaced? Do you have a view? Yes? Oh, yeah.
A question in relation to that, just to bring the legal aspect of authorship and ensuing ownership into it. When I'm listening to you guys talking about the creative process and the role potentially that AI has to play in that, I always wonder where exactly we can or should draw the line between intervention that helps us, like using Sibelius notation software, stuff like that, like using a feather to write in fancy ink maybe hundreds of years ago. Where do we draw the line between the instrument and the actual entity that risks losing composers the link between their output as a creative entity and then the ultimate output of the music, and where, as a result of that, does the legal scission of no longer copyright arise? So that's more of a question from a non-composer with a legal background to a composer that looks a bit more from the creative side.
Well, thank you for that. I think composing music is a mixture of training, intuition, and luck, basically. You have a fundament of things you learned, and then you do something, and like Anselm said, it's often happy accidents that actually end up being something quite cool. But if your intuition or perception doesn't grab that accident and then turns it into art, it's not going to happen. So whenever I use notation software, I use sort of a proofreader of my music, basically. And as long as my music intuition and my idea of this being my work is intact, I mean, we all use these in our DLWs, all these wonderful tools from all these VST plugins that are basically capable of just writing an entire piece of music just by having a chord play, and it models and it evolves, and it sounds quite good. I would never, ever submit a piece like that because I don't feel ownership to it. So I think it's quite subjective because a lot of people do that because it's easy to write music that's pretty good. But I know there are some scoring competitions in California where they don't allow the composers to use any sounds that have generated or evolved into anything else, because whose music is it then? And I think it's a good question, but I think that comes down to the integrity of the individual composers. Because I could easily claim something as being my music, although I kind of know that it's basically Spitfire Audio's music, if I'm completely honest. But I would, hopefully I haven't done that. And I may have done if I was really pressed for time, but I hope I haven't. So yeah, it's a really good question, and a really relevant question as well.
Yeah, in legal terms, a piece of music or any work has to be human-made, otherwise it's not protected by author's right in Europe. You cannot own anything. The recording is maybe something different, but Well, there is a gray zone, I think. So if we look at our work like for 20 years now, so there's technology included, and maybe you don't develop a piece like this with just having your hands on the keyboard and letting a plugin do the piece, but maybe you include a bar of it or something. So it's kind of feeling where the limit is. How do you feel about it, Michel?
It's a gray zone. I don't know. I mean, you know, when you start to mix up, you know, you could having tools, having plugins, let them do the job. Turning on, you could say DJs. How many composers are DJs? You know, or you know, it's also very gray zone. You know. I mean, most of them has built up a credible repertoire, claiming being composers. Sometimes I have my doubts on the idea of calling it composing, but I don't want to judge on that. So, you know, what we use the tools that we have, and we have to deal with that. I think it's important for everybody of us to kind of be like fair for yourself, be honest with yourself and how creative you are. I'm sure there are composers out there that really doesn't use samples at all or use synthesizers at all. They all starts from scratch with just a monotone sound or just one source sound and starts to build a complete soundscape from almost nothing. That's what I call being creative. And the problem is, and maybe it's the biggest problem, you know, we as human beings, we are made to be lazy. We are built like that, biologically like that, because we want to save energy. And the more laziness you're going to go into your path, the more laziness probably you're going to end up be like as a creative person. So I think you should be careful with that and protect what you are able to do so and go for the creative part. I think we should embrace that.
And should the law then sanction laziness?
Well, no, I'll have another thing. I would like to know if I'm hearing something, if it's AI music, if it's an AI sound, or is it human-made sound? I have I would call it a human right to know what am I hearing. If somebody calls me, I would like to know, is this a machine or is it a human? If I receive a mail, I would like to know that as a right. Is this email generated by human or is this generated by man? I think that should be a right.
That's something that the EU AI Act is intending to do, right? With the transparency things, not only in terms of creative output, but also if you interact with the chatbot, if an AI recommender system is used in order for your next Spotify playlist to be playlist. Wow, AI is truly everywhere. In your playlist, if AI is used, that you should know, and that therefore transparency in all different aspects should be adduced to the conversation. When it enters into force, largely next summer, that should be the case. But in terms of creative output, I always find it a bit strange to hear about the transparency requirement, because if you are transparent, you're like, yeah, it's an AI thing, you lose the copyright. So why would you then say that it's an AI thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If only to maintain your integrity and to hide your laziness. But then we turn back to the question, what do we do about that?
Well, maybe instead of having these contracts where there's this option that a producer asks legally rights to train your music with AI, maybe you should declare as a composer that the music that you deliver is completely from the first note till the last note created without AI, at least in the creative process of that. Maybe you might use tools that has like AI generated elements, and synthesized sometimes can be AI also, but why not turn that around, and you as a producer, okay, I hired the composer and it's been human work from the first note till the last note. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm.
I would think that's a super good idea, and I would really be behind that, but I'm not the person with the money. No. And will they care? I'm not sure.
Well, it depends who the consumers are. If the consumers wants to hear a product that is human made or is it AI made? I don't know. How many people are you interested to hear a score that is completely AI made? Is there any interest in that?
Yes.
I think so, because at the moment it's a novelty still.
But do you want to pay for that?
No, I'd like to hear it.
So.
Yeah. Because we're still at the phase where it's a novelty. Yeah. Also, people generate songs for their whatever Christmas parties and whatever we're gonna see a ton load of AI generated songs for this upcoming holiday season. And people are like, that's fun.
Of course.
But at some point it'll stop being fun, and hopefully it'll start being just kind of bad. But the problem we have is that it actually isn't that bad. I mean, the film music I've heard hasn't been good, but I've heard some really good songs being generated. Obviously, they've been generated because they're good songs because the the music they were trained on was really good. And so, yeah, I think at the moment it's a novelty, but at some point it won't be. And I'm a bit fearful for that point where we're just used to it.
Yeah. And I think fraud will not only be among the big providers, the platforms, the ones with the money, will also be among composers themselves. So there will be composers pretending to be great composers with a lot of output, but they will apply AI to do their output, and they will register it to the collecting societies, and it's actually not possible in that way. But how do we deal with a situation like that, where we have competition, knowing that this is not all honest, but we have to deal with it? And then there are ones, we know what they do, and they have more output, and we have to compete with it. And is there some fear, or do you say this is irrelevant?
Well, I already had that. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I'm meeting people. I say, hey, Michelino, I did some prompts in AI, and I got some 3 nice songs, and I asked some variation. I got 3 more songs. I got 6 songs. Why don't you think I should register this and bring it out? And hopefully it's going to be played on the radio, and it's my name, and I'm a composer, you know? So you're sitting there, you're listening to this, and you think, wow, you know, this is tsunami, you know. How does a collective society can survive this? I don't think they can't survive this, right? I mean, and there are, like, for instance, in Holland, there's a library company who had started 2000. You had like a little office with 4 composers. They worked for 300 euros a day, composing music every day, delivered 1 composition a day. Now, some years ago, 2 years ago, they fired all those composers, and they hired 2 engineers writing prompts, and they have like hundreds pieces of music a day. You know, so those composers, young students, they're at home now, so they are not having the ability to experience, to develop. So it's not a good situation, right? But it's happening, it's going on, and we will face this, and we have to find, hopefully, that's why I said you hold on the storm, you know.
Barbara, what would you do if you had the suspicion that one of your composers was cheating in that way?
Yeah, let's go back to the lazy composers. Maybe scare the composers, but I have to be honest that I haven't come across a composer that said, yes, I'm using AI for creating.
But they say no. They say no, but you have the suspicion that it's happening.
But yeah, at the moment, do aware. Let's scare you all a bit. If you would use AI for composing, for creating, yeah, it might be that you are violating someone else's rights, because in the input side, yeah, we all know the authorization of the authors has not been asked. The internet has just been scraped. So at the moment, yeah, it can be that your output, your composition is a violation of something that exists already. So that's a threat on the one hand, but yeah, it's true that for some genres, library music, as you say, where the music, do we want to hear AI music? Some consumers, they don't mind playing games, whatever music is playing during the game you are playing. If it's AI generated, or if it was a brilliant composer behind it, we won't mind as well. I also think for for example, animation, children's series, where a lot of music has to be produced and where budgets are tight, and most composers come at the end, and then there's no budget. I'm sure you all come across the fun, producer saying, "I only have this much left in the budget," and there you are at the end of the production. The ideal situation is where, as a composer, you are there from the beginning in the screenwriting phase, and let's not forget it's an audiovisual work. I do believe that these composers will still stand out, where you, as a composer, the audio part is the first word of the word part of the word, go in dialogue with a director who might not know what he wants, which is quite often the case, and then it's up to you as a composer with all your brilliant ideas to go into dialogue and to convince the producer. And I'm sure that these composers will remain, and they will have to use AI to their benefit in the process. Lots of the steps that Michelino has said can help you, because you get like your tight budgets, and if there are some steps that you can let AI do for you, that means you can hold on to a bigger creative fee. So yeah, obviously the ones that's always been the case. The one that remains is all the companies that once said I'm not going to work with a computer are not here anymore, and I believe that will be the same for composers. So some will disappear, yeah, but there are too many composers, so maybe that's not. I mean, I've heard a young composer say last week, there are too many composers, there's too much competition. I don't fear AI, if it's now AI I'm competing with, or the composers. Obviously, for the ethical part, that's another discussion, one I fully understand, because I receive emails now from people I know don't speak French well, and perfectly written French, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know she could write French that well. And then a second later, of course, it's AI, and I feel tricked, and that's not a nice feeling. So it's the same with the audiovisual aspect. And
but once people don't care about it, and it just works, it will happen in a way.
But what's next then? Because music, sure, and also we see from our screenwriting colleagues, they're also afraid of this. So now we have a producer and director who don't need a composer, not a screenwriter. And in Denmark, they built Nordic Films has built a studio that can light whatever they want in whichever way they want. So we don't need a lighting assistant anymore. And editing, is that next? Probably. So we don't need an editor. Mm-hmm. So at some point we'll just have a filmmaker who's just a filmmaker. And like I said at the beginning, I think the best thing about being a film composer is being part of a team. And with that team gone, then what's next? For some reason, I've never seen producers talking about sort of replacing themselves. Which is, it's just, that's one of the things I tried when I speak to my colleagues, is something, we need to keep that integrity, because, yeah, sure, we do use AI, and I think everyone will, but why are we doing this? We're doing this to create the best content we can, best film, the best TV show. And I don't think that, you were talking about children's shows. Look at children's shows from the 70s, and look at listen to the music. I mean, in Sweden, well, the Astrid Lindgren thing, that's like fusion things being written by Jan Johansson and Georg Riedel, and in odd meters, and the kids didn't care, it's just music, but it sounds amazing. And today we're left mostly with these whimsical things. And so what happened, is that the right way to go? Because if it is, then we are definitely going in that direction quite fast at the moment. But I do think we need to stop and wonder what's next, and what is the end goal actually of this exercise AI is doing at the moment on creators. Yeah.
Well, a friend of mine is the station voice of a big commercial broadcaster, and he's well known, and they would never replace him because he is famous and everyone wants to hear his voice. They have now trained an algorithm with his voice, and he has given consent because it was stressful to rush to the studio every night with something new to just speak in 5 minutes. And he's happy because he gets license money and says, I'm doing some jobs, but some is done by AI. They have my license, I get my money, everything is fine. And I say, okay, this is great. The problem is not with you, it's with future voices that are not known, and they use your voice as training material and use some other voices and do something new once they want to replace you. So you don't have the problem, others could have the problem. This links back to the issue of contracts and the political situation, so that actually the best protection is if we have to give permission to what is done with our works, and then we can achieve a situation where we control it and can also draw some benefits out of it, because for him it is beneficial. And I would personally not exclude being involved in a project where my music is used as training material if I have to give consent later to use this as an addition to my work and there is some remuneration or so. I would not exclude it, at least, but I don't want my music to train others' AI output.
And I think one of the things because I think that's a great point, but one of the things we need is solidarity between the composers, because if I say no to something and you just jump on board and say yes, then me saying no didn't really, the only thing it meant was me not getting the job. But if I know that every single composer in here says no to the same shitty contract I just received because it is objectively shitty, then we've actually achieved something. In Denmark at the moment, and I'm sure it's the same, I don't know where you guys are from, but it's probably the same in your countries, we do see an increasingly amount of horrific contracts being sent to younger composers. Contracts they would never dare send to someone of Michel's caliber, because he knows what he's talking about. He knows what a bad contract looks like. But a young upcoming composer might not. And whenever we have a composer society as well, and we see these contracts, we go back to the production companies. They're like, oh, well, sorry about that. Here's the real one. And so basically, if you just say no, forget about it. They're like, oh, well, have this then. When it's not really a question of bargaining. It's just they'll just give you a better contract if you say no. And so, but if the person sitting next to you says yes, then it's just a race to the bottom of really poor contracts. So uniting and standing together, I think, is one of the things we actually can do as composers, and realizing the benefits of a good contract. And in Denmark, we are at the moment, together with our CMO, we are creating this standard contract. So you as a composer, you don't receive the contract from the sort of the standard production company contract. You receive the standard composer's contract that we and the CMO have actually created. And I think that's an important step in order to at least, do some good regarding contracts.
Solidarity, and also not being too afraid of discussing contracts. This is also a learning from our panels with the streaming services. And so some streaming services demand having all single tracks of your music, not just stems, but all single tracks. And a composer approached me and said, well, how can I deal with this? And I said, no, it's insane. You cannot hand out all single tracks. And he said, well, it's in the contract. And I said, well, talk about it. And in the end, it was not a big issue. They said, well, we didn't know about the problem. We are fine with just 8 stems. And so don't be too afraid. But we should be more afraid of the time now, because it's time for the Q&A. I'm actually sure that this topic will bring up questions from the audience.
Hi there, my name is Luc Gulink. I'm also a lawyer in music and audiovisual. I just want to add something, if I may. When it comes to protecting the rights of film composers in relation to AI, contract negotiations are, of course, one thing. And we just heard Josephine and also Jesper to pointing out the pitfalls of such negotiations. But I think there's another avenue to explore, and I think you haven't touched upon that yet. That is the fair practice avenue, whereby, at least in Europe, governments and institutions, they subsidize production of films, and whereby, by way of a fair practice model, a scheme, the relevant rules could be imposed on not only producers but also broadcasters and even streaming platforms. And I think it's a question of getting organized politically and talk to your MPs and talk to your European MPs in the first place, first and foremost, to get such a thing done, because then there is a level playing field, and the problems that you would have with individual contract negotiations would be a lot lighter, I think. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, and it's really relevant. And there are so many topics we could discuss, but I do think it's a good point. And also, we are seeing at the moment, I think it's in Spain actually, we are seeing some really positive first steps in France as well. Because in my experience in Denmark and the Nordic countries, no one wants to be a first mover in that regard. So it's really good to see that we actually have some European countries that are doing some really positive things, because I think that will trickle down on the other countries and sort of urge them to do the same thing. Because you're absolutely right, it's really important.
Absolutely. This is what the organizations do. So we're involved, I can speak for Germany, in stakeholder dialogues with the parliament. And the experience is that politicians are much more willing to listen when we compare this to the situation we had like 10 to 5 years ago with the platforms. There it was a feel like, oh no, we don't want to touch that because it's not popular. And so, but AI touches everyone. And so more and more politicians are aware, and it's not so much about parties anymore. It's about people you can talk to and you can approach. So in that regard, I would say the situation has improved, and it's definitely worth grabbing every situation possible to make our stance clear. And there will be people who say, okay, we didn't know about your needs and the way you work, and now we know it, we can at least help doing something. More questions?
My name is Andras. I'm a video game composer and also working for film recently. So my question is, do you know what the opinion is of film directors? Because they have like a creative vision and they put their heart and soul into making a work of art. And I'm wondering if they are happy to save some money to break the tradition of that, a creative process.
Well, it's not the film director who decides the money, I think. It's more the producer's role. Yeah,
there are some film directors who think about music really early on, and there are some who barely thinks about it at all, sadly. And that's the honest, annoying truth. So there
are different attitudes. One film director says, I always want to have a human doing the music, and the other director says, I'm curious to know what AI does, and I want to experiment with AI because then it's even more my film because I've prompted the music or so. This is happening.
Yeah, maybe at the other side, very often directors sometimes shows they have a clear idea, but at the end it's clear that they don't have an idea at all, and they need a composer to. It's more the human collaboration between people, which makes value to work together. And what the tool is less important. So if you want to use AI, maybe it might be a help, but it's the composer's role, and how do you approach and how you work together to spend months together or weeks or whatever to come up to a result. I think that's much more important. So I think being creative is always a winner.
Hello, my name is Daniel Verstappen, and I want to actually go further on what Michel was speaking about. What I really like, he said composers could declare that the music is made 100% humanly. So I was just thinking, could we use AI to detect when music is AI generated or original, so that something will be made and then every time it's something like when you go to the shop and your money will be go into a machine and you see it's 100% legal.
It is already possible to some extent. There are providers offering services that detect which work has been included to what extent, and this is maybe a solution to some problems and also a chance for fair licensing.
Just to make the link between music and academia in this specific context, you may know that if you want a degree, you have to write a master thesis, and that's a very specific point that we are running into difficulties with at the moment, to be sure that the students write their own work. And there are certain tools available, but I've done the tests specifically with academic writing, and it doesn't work. And how will we ever know for sure whether it does work? Because if you then ask the person, is it correct? They will say, yes, of course it's correct. It's completely me. So I would say, yes, things are progressing as they are with the quality of AI-generated music. But I think the one will always outpace the other as long as there are vested interests in making sure that we don't know everything. And there are. I don't want to be like don't want to bring down the vibes, but the vested interests are there, and the status quo is always the nicest place to be for the people in charge. I don't want to be like very much of a manifesto builder here, but it's the truth, right? Where is the money? What does the money want? The money wants us to not know for sure whether something is AI generated or not. But I do agree that tech detecting stuff like that is getting more and more potent. And if we can determine that something is wrongly attributed, then the law can do something to sanction that. If not on the basis of copyright, then on the basis of unfair market practices, because you deceive the consumer as to the either human or robotic origin of the good at issue, right? So once we can make sure, the law can do something usefully, but am I 100% sure that we have a 100% foolproof method of finding out? No.
Then again, there are also humans who are prompt specialists who are able to unveil works that have been included. So they prompt in a specific way, and all of a sudden they get the original work that actually is supposed not to be there. This is really amazing what they do, because they just know how it works and how they can trick the algorithm.
No, my name is Thijs Havens. I'm a programmer and a musician. Just a thought that I was actually curious to hear some of your thoughts on. I was wondering if we're not maybe over-romanticizing or over-sanctifying the non-AI world. As in, with all the talk about the remuneration and so forth, even, of course, composers are inspired by tons of compositions and stuff they hear from people that will not be remunerated whenever they'll make a piece. Same with, the certain interchangeability of compositions in the more commercial field, I'd say. I don't know, just some thoughts on that. Like, aren't we maybe making the difference? It's a major difference, of course, because AI is a major new development. But some of the points that we run into, I feel, in terms of creativity and originality, have always been there, and even the ownership of authorship, I would say. But I was curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I just want to say that art is there to inspire everyone, consumers, but also other artists. So obviously, copyright. Let that be. You can inspire others. I think what's happening here goes further than just inspiration. So I don't know if that's something that you were, because I don't have a feeling that we're romanticizing anything. I mean, I think you still can compose in the style of John Williams or Johan Johansson. That's allowed, but scraping the internet and really using these pieces can go further than just the inspiration, in my feeling. I don't know.
Yeah, and this is the first point in history where someone who has no idea about music, has never written a single piece of music, can actually generate music that a lot of people will think sounds quite good. So we need to get used to that, and also we need to make sure that the laws know that, because for me as a composer, I think one of the moments I'm most proud of is the creative process. Having the bounced final mix of my score is nice, but it's not my end goal. But if your end goal is to have a nice sounding score, and the process didn't matter to you, then yeah, sure, I get your point. But to me as a composer, the process of creating this work alongside with the director and his or her artistic vision, that's the purpose for me of writing film music. Having a nice sounding piece of music is just the result of that process. And I would hate to miss that process, because then it doesn't matter to me. That's at least my point of view.
I think AI is a model built on likeliness, and it's lacking intuition. So if I imagine a person born on an island, just hearing some pieces of music and getting some instruments, he or she would possibly be able to do some music later and to invent something based on this basic experience, but AI would not be able to do this. So there is something that comes from the human. Of course, we are inspired by a lot of works, but it's not that we just suck in millions of works and build processes of likeliness. So it's just a different nature of things. And I think the argument that we are doing nothing different than AI does is the most dangerous argument in terms of politics, because then we are lost, then we don't deserve any protection, then it's actually the end of copyright in times of AI. So we always have to point out the difference. And to my experience in all those stakeholder dialogues I mentioned, I would say that 90% of the politicians understand it. So they immediately admit that it's something different and that it affects actually everyone. And it would be to the disadvantage of the whole society if we just assumed that humans are nothing different than AI.
I just want to start by saying that I don't use AI. I don't like AI. I don't support AI. But I just want to bring a kind of a continuation of what you were saying. I feel like it's like ever since composers were only writing by hand on paper, we can all understand that technology has only gone up from there, and almost anyone now, and almost anyone can write, and you don't even have to know how to write, and you can write a melody on the finale or on Sibelius, on anything. And I think AI is just the continuation of this by making that you don't even have to know music. And I think it's kind of telling that if the only thing that can take your job is an AI, is that maybe like you're not special enough. And I think that if your place is taken by an algorithm, it's because you're not pushing anymore. And you said just there's too many composers, and I think there's also, you can see this in pop music where everything is already almost the same, and people are not listening to albums anymore. People are listening to playlists, and playlists that all show you the same kind of music. So what's the difference if you're listening to human-made music or AI music if you're not even listening to the artist and you're just listening to playlists? So I just think that it might be rough for the newer generations, such as us and such as yourselves as well, but I think it's maybe a necessary evil that pushes art forward, that pushes people to be special once again. Because as you can see in pop music, there used to be a lot of different artists, and now you can maybe listening to the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the only value that you as a composer will have is the authenticity. Develop your own voice, your own sound, your own character, signature. That will make those composers will have future, I believe, especially with the whale of AI that's coming up to us. So those who will achieve to find their voice into the music, but actually that's always been like that. It's also today like that. Even if you don't consider AI, it's been the same. You had so many composers who were keeping copying everybody and actually never develop kind of a identity. They will always have difficulties to continue. Well, it's not only the reason, there are maybe other reasons also, but I think that's crucial. And you're right, I believe also that now with this AI, it's going to be even more important to go for your thing and yeah, your signature, it's crucial.
I'll keep it brief. I think whenever technology improves, some professions go out of work, and we're always fighting to keep our profession because my profession is important. But I do think that when it happens, it's because it gets replaced by something better. And at the moment, we can actually easily replace all of us with AI, but it's not better. It's just more convenient. And that's a big difference to me. It may be in 5 or 10 years, it may be better, but it's not at the moment. And I refuse to give in on that at the moment. So I think we need to fight this revolution, or at least point it in the direction that we as composers feel like it should be, because it's not good enough yet just to accept it as a necessary evil. AI is an amazing tool; it can do so much good, but like you were saying with profits and everything, the purpose of good sort of goes out the window, and it's just for profit. And that's what I'm seeing at the moment. I'm seeing companies generate things for profit, not for art. And as long as that's the thing, we need to make sure that we fight in order to go in that direction.
I think these are great closing words. I would love to continue this open conversation. It would be great, but our time is over right now. So, well, with this said, thank you so much for being here for this wonderful discussions. And I think we will be around, so to discuss further aspects would be great. Thank you.